to this meeting of the local review body of the 14th of August, and I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chairman for this meeting? Anyone else? Can you join me, Councillor Hislop?
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you here today. Could we have Sederunt apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have 5 members present.
Right. We'll now hand over to the clerk to take us through the review body, through the document papers for the meeting. Declarations of interest. Jim? No other declarations? Right. Move on to meat of the meeting. Hand you over to the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that there are 2 notices of review for consideration at this meeting. Item 4, Clachaneasy, Newton Stewart, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house, reference 181815 PIP. You have your index of contents, which includes your notice of review and related documents, your report on handling, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, comments of the applicant's agent on observations of the appointed officer, and further comments from third parties, the planning application form, associated plans and supporting information, additional information submitted with the notice of review which was not in front of the appointed officer when the application was determined, the decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, and photos of the application site. The grounds for refusal are 1. The proposed development fails to meet any of the criteria in Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policy H3, which only permits the erection of new houses in the countryside in particular circumstances, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. As such, the proposal would be contrary to the provisions of the development plan as set out in Policy H3 and to associated supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside. 2. The proposed development would lead to an unacceptable risk of flooding and would have the potential to place buildings and persons at significant risk of flooding. As such, the proposal would be contrary to the provisions of the development plan as stated in Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan Policies IN7 and OP1F, to associated supplementary guidance, and to the principles of Scottish planning policy on flooding. The requested method of determination has been on 3 points, which is the basis of further written submissions to enable the applicant to clarify his reasons for the appeal, on the basis of 1 or more hearing sessions to consider in detail the reasons for temporary permission, and 3, an inspection of the land, which is subject of the review. The grounds stated in the notice of review in summary are: the site has a long history of continuous occupation, and this should have been taken into account as a material consideration in respect of this application. Planning permission granted in April 1990 for the alteration and change of use to convert an outbuilding into a dwelling house at this site should be taken into account as a material consideration in respect of this application. Reference 90P10035. One of the reasons provided for refusal was that the proposal did not comply with any of the requirements contained within the supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside, but content that the many of the criteria contained in the guidance which would favour the application has been ignored, particularly in respect of rural brownfield sites. Relative to that guidance in relation to rural brownfield sites, the following criteria favour the development of the site as proposed. The site is occupied by redundant unused buildings and the land has been significantly degraded by the former activity. The site undoubtedly seriously detracts from the visual and environmental amenity of the area. This site is very demonstrably visually and environmentally intrusive just next to a main tourist route and is not likely to be returned to woodland. There are no other pressing uses on this site for business or tourism, and it would remove the derelict buildings. There is particularly no biodiversity on this site, and it is largely built over with buildings and concrete, and it has no cultural or historical significance, and there is no loss of architecturally valuable buildings, prime agricultural land, areas of woodland or wildlife habitat. The proposal would also satisfy the other criteria contained within the supplementary guidance relating to rural brownfield sites, and therefore contend that this is a classic case which meets most of the criteria in this policy and which therefore should allow a new house to be built on this site. The Council's flood risk management team has been overcautious in their assessment of this site, and there is virtually no risk of the site being flooded or any risk to the occupants. In conclusion, the planning officer's assessment of this application was inconsistent and unfair when judged against the housing in the countryside policy and brownfield site policy in particular. The planning officer states that the application fails to meet any of the criteria in policy H3 in the local development plan, when it has very clearly a brownfield site. A positive decision will allow this unsightly brownfield site to be replaced with an attractive dwelling. You also have your further comments by interested parties, a list of the development plan policies, and the main issues for the local review body to consider are: should the additional information which has been submitted in support of the application, which appears at pages 73 to 94 of your papers, after determination by the appointed officer, be accepted as part of this review by the local review body members. Section 43B of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 provides that a party to the proceedings is not to raise any matters which were not before the appointed person at the time of the determination review was made, unless that party can demonstrate A, that the matter could not have been raised before that time, or B, that it's not been raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. The justification for the submission of this additional information, which was not in front of the appointed officer, has been stated by the agent as follows. In relation to the submitted flood risk assessment, it was not provided with the application documents, as the applicant had no idea that there was any risk of flooding whatsoever. The applicant had lived on this site all her life, and it had never been near to flooding, therefore there was no reason to consider a flood risk assessment. In relation to the photograph, having made the outline planning herself without the advice of an agent, the applicant believed it would be approved on the basis of it being a brownfield site, and therefore did not realise the need to include a supporting statement or any other documentation which may have been a material support to the application. Does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan in principle? In particular, does the proposal fail to meet any of the criteria set out in policy H3 of the local development plan and to the associated supplementary guidance? Is the proposal accompanied by the necessary level of supporting information in accordance with the relevant supplementary planning guidance? Would the proposal give rise to an unacceptable risk of flooding? This is obviously affected by whether or not the local review body members are minded to accept the reasoning for the submission of the additional information which was not in front of the appointed officer at the time of determination. If it is concluded that the proposal fails to comply with the terms of the development plan in principle, are there any material consideration of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development plan? Having outlined the documents within members' papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that there are no representations from any parties will be heard today. The options available to the local review body are: it can decide it has sufficient information before it to enable to determine the review today, either accept or reject consideration of the additional information submitted in support of the review, but which was not in front of the appointed officer when the case was determined, request further information in the form of written representations. The local review body will be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who must provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak and on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves that it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting. He is here to assist for this item, and it is confirmed that he has not had any involvement in this case and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for this application. He is purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process. If members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the Chairman to lead the debate and in the first instance through the agenda papers together and decide if it has sufficient information to determine the review today.
Are we going to get a slideshow?
Thanks.
I think there's some pictures of the application, so have a look at these.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that these pictures have been provided by the case officer and the captions as well. I've not been out to visit the site, but I know where it is. I've driven past it umpteen times in the past. So you've got a view here of the application site. This is the main road. It's looking broadly in a southwesterly direction, and you can see the premises there, which is subject of the application. Again, that's the application site. That's looking more towards the northwest. Clachaneasy Cottage, we'll come on to that, is on the right-hand side. That's the view south from the application site, looking down the public road, so that's at the approximate access point. And that's the opposite view, looking north along that road, with Clachaneasy Cottage located there. This is a view from the north looking south. Again, it's on the A714 public road, and the site here is obscured by Clachaneasy Cottage on the right-hand side. But it gives you an idea of the characteristics of the locality.
Any questions on the photos? No? Right. I think we now move through the papers to see if there's sufficient information. Councillor Carruthers?
No, sorry, Chair. I've read through the papers and I was going to say I suppose that we do have enough information, but maybe, sorry, Chair, let's leave it to you.
Well, if that's the case, our members, they've all had the chance to read through the papers, are happy that the information provided is able to allow us to take a decision. Yeah, right. Robert?
Sorry, Chair, there's one thing I should have pointed out. All of the members here today should have a printout of an email from Mr. Brown from the 28th of June 2019. That relates to the guidance note that the clerk read out to you, giving the justification for the original information. That should have been included within the LRB paper, so apologies it wasn't, but that is essentially the agent's justification for including the additional information today rather than submitting it and making it in front of the appointed officer when a decision was taken.
Right, if we've got enough information, one question I would like to ask, the main issues that the clerk read out was section 43B of the Town and Country Planning Act. A party to the proceeding is not allowed to raise any matters. Now, is that to a planning committee or is that to a local review body? Because my view is the local review body is the appeal body. I have been at a public inquiry where the actual planning application from the council refusing it to the planning appeal, the application changed. That was whole new evidence. Now, what does the Town and Country Planning Act relate to? A planning committee or an appeal body?
In this case, it can relate to either. It can be either an appeal to Scottish ministers or the local review process. When the Act was originally drafted in 1997, local review bodies didn't exist. Every decision could be, if it was refused, could be subject to appeal to Scottish ministers. The local review body was subsequently brought in despite later regulations and amendment to the Act, but Section 43B still sets out principles relative to both processes. So, in other words, there has to be a justification given for the submission of the additional information because the appointed officers made their decision at that time in the light of the information they had in front of them. And there's some commentary on that and why the information wasn't sought by the appointed officer within the papers. But no, in answer to your question, Section 43B of the Act relates to both appeals to Scottish Government as well as notices of review to the Council's local review body.
Councillor Crothers.
Similar point, but when I heard the clerk speaking there, I suppose been through the scenario before as well, my understanding is there's further information been added within the papers, and it's whether we accept that or not. Would that be the case? And if it is a justification, I mean, I personally think we should accept it, because after hearing what I've heard in regards to the applicant representing themselves in particular, we're dealing with a professional architect, I would say, or a planning consultant in this case, so probably quite genuinely they weren't actually aware that should have seen it as being a brownfield site, didn't really need a flood risk assessment. They lived there or they've never seen it flooding, and I suppose again, they seen it as being the supporting statement, probably thought just a brownfield site. So personally, my view in regards to that, so should we actually see this and accept this as being a material consideration? I think we should actually consider it as part of the reviews we go forward.
Is anyone otherwise minded? Councillor McComb.
It's a review of the case. You're effectively making a de novo decision on what you have in front of you. The issue with the extra information is, as I've said, it wasn't in front of the appointed officer at that point in time. If you feel, as per the clerk's guidance, that the matter could not have been raised before this time, or it's not been raised at that time was as a consequence of exceptional circumstances, then you can accept that information and consider it as a local review body today and take it into account. So you're making the decision, if you accept that additional information, you're making the decision based on the information you have in front of you today, which is obviously then going to be different to the information that was in front of the appointed officer. But you are making the decision based on what you have in front of you today if you accept it.
Thank you.
Yeah, my point of view here, I think we've got enough information to make a decision on this application today.
So, the grounds for refusal were that it didn't meet H3. Is there any sort of views within the papers? I note that it is a brownfield site, and within the policy that we have, I would say it is a brownfield site. It isn't a building of any real significant architectural merit. So I feel that it has an opportunity to actually fit in with that policy. Are other members? Councillor Crothers?
I would feel, so when I read this initially, I thought, well, the case officers, I suppose there's one thing I see, the case officer and the appointed officer who's reflecting on the case officer is report in the first place the same person, for what I can see. I thought, we felt a wee bit uneasy about that. I thought it should have been an independent person, but we've got independent planning advice here today, obviously. So when it comes to looking at the face of it, is it a brownfield site? Absolutely is. Has it had a historical, it goes back, and it says that within the reports, 30 years or so, maybe since. There is a point, it says it previously had a permission for a caravan, which is still a static caravan, still sees on site. Now, after 10 years, my understanding that would become a permanent position. That would become a permanent permission. So probably a bit of clarity in regards to that. But when it comes to the brownfield site, I think we have got new information here. It is a brownfield site. And I think probably the case officer was thinking the same, because he's mentioned it. But ultimately what he's saying, from my understanding, unless I'm wrong and can be corrected, that actually we've got supplementary guidance that says, okay, it may well be seen as a brownfield site. You have to tell us that you think that's your view. But secondly, then you have to provide certain information that is alluded to within the supplementary guidance, which has not been provided. So I think there's no doubt it's a brownfield site. Historically, the principle has been developed previously, but they're saying that's lapsed because of time. But I still, to the question I've got, actually there was residential. It may well be that the permission would lapse and it wouldn't be there, but I think looking at it, it's been there for well over 10 years. Some of the thing that's been there for 10 years then has a use anyways, whether it's been through the planning process or not, is my understanding. So that's maybe a moot point, but if it has, then therefore the principle of residential development has been established and is still there. is the only thing I thought as I was reading this. But so is it, to me, it's like a planning principle. My understanding again is that actually you'd have to, it's unlike an outline planning process and with planning outline permission, where it used to be now planning principle. You could used to go back and satisfy the conditions and that you could then build without coming back. My understanding now is that planning principle, that's not the case. When I've asked that question before, you'd have to come back with full application anyways. So ultimately, so whether this was, I've been looking at it, the case of it, what's in front of us today, you think, okay, it is a brownfield site, it should really put forward the right case. This is actually, it would benefit the local area. There's benefits of having the right development on this particular site. So maybe 2 or 3 points what our independent planning advisor could pick up on there. But I think, especially in regards to is there actually a current in real terms because of the 10-year law thing, is there actually a residential permission there already?
Mr. Duncan?
In respect of the residential caravan, I would direct members towards pages 25 and 26 of your papers. So that's towards the delegated report where it covers the planning history. So in April 1988, you had planning permission for temporary siting of a residential caravan for 5 years, and that was renewed in November 1993. If you turn over the page, that's planning permission 93 P1434. So that was a temporary permission. So on that basis, and I'm assuming again that was for 5 years, although I don't know that, it would have expired in the late 1990s. I'm assuming it's the same caravan that's there, but at this point in time, I don't know if it has been used for residential purposes for a period exceeding 10 years. It would be open for the applicant to submit a certificate of lawfulness if they could demonstrate and provide compelling evidence that it had been occupied on a permanent residential basis for over 10 years. Offhand, with the information I've got, I can't answer that. It would need to be the subject of a certificate of lawfulness application. But then that would, if that was submitted, and it's all ifs and buts and assumptions, if that was submitted and it was proved that there was, a permanent residential permission there, then that would establish the principle of a residence on the site. But that's obviously not what is being pursued here. It's being pursued on a brownfield basis. In response to the comments, yes, H3 is guiding policy and principle, and that's covered in the appointed officer comments on pages 40 and 41. The supplementary guidance is part of the adopted LDP as well, so it's got the same status as the policy, and the difficulty appears to be that in terms of the criteria in the rural brownfield section of the supplementary guidance, and that's within your papers between pages 114 and 116, that the case simply hasn't been made to justify it under terms of policy H3. Going beyond that, if you look at page 41, the reason why the flood risk assessment was never sought was because it was felt that it contravened policy and principle anyway, and in circumstances like that, you wouldn't ask an applicant to submit further information if it wasn't going to make a difference to the outcome. So those seem to be really the key issues to myself. What I would maybe advise in relation to the additional information, if you're minded to accept the photograph and the, I think it's a level 3 flood risk assessment on pages 77 to 94. If you're minded to accept those, do you wish to consult on those? Do you wish to issue a procedure notice and get a technical view from the likes of SEPA and the Council's flood risk team on the content of that document, because it's quite a specialist piece of information, yeah. I hope that helps.
Councillor Crothers?
No, it does help. It certainly helps you. And the only question, it's a curious question more than anything you didn't answer, Robert, was in principle, can conditions be satisfied? Could something be built on the back of a planning principle permission, or has it got to come back to a full application anyways? Because I do think that the case officer, on the face of it, looking at our policies as they are, has probably made the right decision. But whether we've got new evidence, and if we're accepting that it's new evidence, we can consider that. It may well change our minds, it may not. So I suppose that's the only thing, because it just sits okay.
So, sorry, I missed that part of the question. If a planning permission in principle is issued, there has to be a further application to flesh out the details of it, and it's known as an application for approval of matters specified in conditions of the planning permission principles. It's a wee bit like Russian dolls. They're kind of two parts of the same process. The first part establishes the principle, the second part establishes the details, but they kind of merge together ultimately and guide the development.
Councillor McComb.
That better. The criteria are there on page 115. My concern is that the applicant's attention was perhaps not drawn to these by the officer, and the applicant simply assumed it was self-evident that this was a brownfield site. And the absence of statements relating to these criteria, of course, led to the decision the officer took. That in the absence of that written evidence, then the recommendation was a refusal. But I would like to think that all applicants are signposted to the supplementary guidance and the importance of reading that guidance. You know, I think sometimes they look at the LDP and they leave it at that. That is certainly a concern of mine.
I think that's a good bit of advice, and we can do that in writing out to people, etc., just to tell them to pay attention to supplementary guidance. Councillor Crothers?
I'll kind of sum up how I'm feeling. I mean, I think if the way it was presented, I think the right decision was made, but ultimately we've got further information here to consider. So I wonder if we could accept whether we do that. I think we should use that. That it's legitimate. It was for legitimate reasons. It wasn't submitted being a layperson that's actually applied for this, not a professional architect or planning consultant. So for those reasons, I think we should accept that. And if we can accept that, I maybe have a different or the same, whatever. I mean, I'll put my view forward anyways, Chairman.
Right. Anyone otherwise minded? I think that was a sort of view that we should approve this as being in line with policy H3 brownfield site because of the fact of the additional information, but that the officer's sort of view on it at the time was correct because the information wasn't there.
I suppose that's probably what I was going to say, but I hadn't got to that point. If we've accepted the fact that, okay, we can use that further information, and if the committee's accepted that, then I think we have got further information that's material to possibly having a different position, and that is at the flood risk assessment. The only thing, Robert's brought up an important point that I hadn't thought of. Should we do our due diligence in regards to that flood risk assessment? I think is what he said, and make sure that it's competent by both the flood risk management team within the council and SEPA. We would normally do that through consultation with a plan application, or can we condition that in such a way that if it was to be granted, I mean, I think my view, it is a brownfield site. Historically, it's there. It's obvious. Is it beneficial? I think it absolutely is beneficial. What's being proposed in principle, an application will have to come in anyways of a type, is what Robert's saying. So the only 2 points, I would support the approval of this, but subject to the right conditions and application obviously coming forward.
Is that a possibility that we actually go to consultation as a condition rather than so that it doesn't need to come back if required, if it meets?
I think if you're issuing a procedure notice, you're issuing, if you like, a demand from a third party for a particular purpose. Now, normally with a planning application, the appointed officer would then consult the likes of SEPA and the council's flood risk management team upon receipt of a flood risk assessment to get their commentary on that and get their advice, because it's such a specialist technical area of knowledge, and would get something back to reassure them that that submission looked sound and it was actually accurate and competent. You could take it into account and rely on it, basically. I think coming back to the brownfield thing, you've obviously got the criteria in the supplementary guidance adopted policy, and you've got them all in bullet points. You either need to be satisfied that they're all met, in which case you're saying it complies with policy in that respect, or you're maybe accepting that they're maybe not all met, in which case it's a departure from policy, but you're minded to support it, and you need to provide grounds to do that. The only thing is with the flood risk assessment, I mean, again, unless you get the specialist knowledge, you're then not going to be sure whether or not that demonstrates as a flood risk or not, and that's important policy grounds, because if there is potential flood risk there and you haven't checked it out with the relevant consultees, there's a risk that that could be contrary to policy.
Councillor Martin.
It's just that on the brownfield site, is just what Robert's saying there, right? The bullet points there. I didn't see this application meeting very many of them bullet points.
Councillor Crothers.
Right, so I'm not going to come in and counter what John said at all there in regards to Councillor Martin anyways, because I think that actually there is a case to refuse this, or to allow the decision to go ahead as it was. That's why I asked the question, will there have to be another application? There will be in one form or another. It may well be the easier, simpler, not as much easier actually, the more cleaner way in it is to say, okay, we'll uphold the previous decision, and the applicant knows absolutely clearly now what has to be in regards to information that comes forward. And it could be in principle, it could be a full application. I think it's just, what do we do best in this case? I do think the case officer was right with information in front of him. Could we make a different decision? We could, but actually, I think maybe for the sake of making the right decision today, to help the applicant and the council be quite clear in how they feel, it might be better what John's proposing actually.
I think based on what Robert's sort of saying with regard to the technical information, it might be better to go down John's line just now, so that can come all back at once. Because, like Robert says, we can't actually at this time say whether the information that's required is correct or not. So that might be an issue that it'd be better maybe possibly to stick with the original and bring it back in with all the information, and it's all fully consulted, and there may be a better solution to this in the end. Because I noticed one of them, physical footprint of the building, well, we've no detail of that just now, so we'd have to condition that in at a future date. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, sorry. I take it this is under LDP. Would there be is there much difference under LDP too? Is it? That could, I don't know.
I don't think there's any huge significant change in the relevant policies, but obviously, I mean, you're looking at a situation, if you did uphold the appointed officer's decision, the applicant would have the right to submit a further application, without incurring a further fee, and they could also introduce new information at that point, such as flood risk assessment, maybe a case as to why they felt the brownfield site should be looked at as either compliant with policy or as a departure from policy. So we could make a fresh case and put a lot of information out for assessment with relevant consultees and get a decision from the appointed officer. And again, if that decision wasn't favourable, they would have a right to go back to the local review body. You can do that. You're allowed to make one further application of the same character or description at the same site within 12 months of the original refusal. So I can't remember off the top of my head what the date was for this, but there is time to do that and to build a further case and have it reconsidered by the appointed officer. So, I mean, I don't know if that helps your thoughts today, but obviously you're here to discuss and make a decision on the case that's in front of you.
Councillor Crothers.
I think on what Councillor Martin said and yourself's absolutely right in regards to the due diligence, I think it just prolong the agony, so to speak, or this particular case. I would support the principle of what John's saying in regards to just uphold the original decision.
Anyone otherwise minded? No? That's a decision.
Thanks, Chairman. So members have agreed not to consider the additional information today due to the consultation over the flood risk assessment and uphold the case officer's original decision.
I thought we considered it, but on the grounds that we want the consultations done, we would recommend that the best way to go forward was to actually refuse today and encourage a a new application with all the suitable information so that we can get all the information as well from relevant parties. So,
Okay.
So you're minded to accept the additional information that's been submitted and accept the reasoning for that, but nevertheless you've looked at that, you've considered it, and you're minded to uphold the appointed officer's decision.
And presumably in the event of a fresh application, additional information may come forward as well.
Okay, yeah. So members have considered the additional information but have decided to uphold the original case officer decision and refuse the application on the grounds detailed in the report.
right, we'll now move on to item 5, Hope Cottage, Durisdeer Mill, Thornhill. Refusal of planning permission for installation of 9 replacement windows and 1 external door with double glazed UPVC. Ready?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, members have their index of contents, which is the notice of review and related documents, the report on handling and related correspondence, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, the planning application form with plans and supporting information, the decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, and photos of the application site. The ground for refusal was that the proposed windows and door are contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan policies H8, alterations and extensions to houses, and HE2, conservation areas, on the grounds that the use of modern UPVC materials are unsympathetic and damaging to this historic character and appearance of the Category C listed building, and fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the Durisdeer conservation area. The requested method of determination is for the review to be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the submitted review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary, over a number of years the applicants have carried out numerous repairs to existing windows which have come at a considerable cost. In addition to defects with the windows, existing stone walls have suffered from dampness due to water ingress through the windows. Existing windows have required and had many repairs over recent time, including cutting out rotten timber, then replacing which again has started to rot. Also due to repairs, the rotten window sash have gaps allowing heat loss and drafts. The gable end window is contributing to the stonework retaining damp. This property is used as a holiday home and holiday let to people visiting this area who are experiencing drafts from existing windows. Also, the cost to the applicant's heating energy bills is increasing month on month. It can be noted from walking around the village and viewing Google Maps that a number of neighbouring properties have replacement UPVC windows, many in untraditional form. The applicants plan to renew windows to match existing styles. It has been brought to the applicant's attention that other listed properties in the conservation area have had UPVC windows approved. After taking a walk around the surrounding properties, found that most properties have various white UPVC windows installed. Looking to replicate with traditional vertical slider sash and case windows matching existing proportions and profiles, also using a timber foil, the appearance of the proposed windows would not overwhelm or damage the original character and appearance of the listed building. Also asked that case 172248 LBC is looked at, as this application was previously granted for replacement UPVC sash and case windows to a listed building. The client now wishes to retain the existing front door in its current form. You also have your development plan policies listed. So the main issues for the local review body to consider is, would the proposal fail to comply with the terms of the development plan, particularly LDP policies H8 and HE2? In particular, would the proposal be unsympathetic and damaging to the historic character and appearance of this listed building? Would the proposal fail to preserve or enhance the character of Durisdeer conservation area? If it is considered that the proposal would fail to comply with the terms of the development plan, are there any material considerations which would justify a determination contrary to the terms of the development plan? Having outlined your documents in the members' papers, it falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to review the case. As with the previous case, no representations from any party will be heard today, and you have the same options available to you as the previous case. Your planning advisor is still present. Members should note that in respect of the associated listed building consent application reference 190528 LBC, which was also refused by the appointed officer, an appeal has been made to the Scottish Ministers but is presently undetermined. DPA reference PPA 1702019. This falls to be considered separately to this review case, and the outcome of this appeal will not affect the decision of the local review body. If members are clear, no further clarification is required. I'll ask the Chairman now to lead the debate and in the first instance determine whether they have sufficient information to make a determination today.
We are, members. We have the report in front of us. Is there any issues that members would like clarified within the report? Any questions? No? Do members feel that they have sufficient... Oh, slides first. Right.
Thanks, Chair. Again, these pictures have been provided by the case officer, as well as the captions. I haven't been out to the site myself. First one, that's the principal elevation of Hope Cottage. So that's showing the kind of character, style, pattern of the front elevation windows that are affected. You can see the immediate neighbour there, Keeper's Cottage on the right hand side. So this is kind of opening out onto the space in the middle of Durisdeer. It's obviously kind of village green type feature. You've got the adjacent A-listed church building and the C-listed Rose Cottage there as well. So this is all within the conservation area. Skipped a few there. Cable elevation of Hope Cottage. It's hidden this, it's down at a lower level. You can see the hedge there on the left hand side. So when we move around, you've got the hedge there. So this is largely out of sight, but you can see the conservatory there, one of the original windows, and then a replacement top hopper window below it. That's the rear elevation of Hope Cottage. Again, you're looking at a single pane window at the bottom story, top hopper opening windows there, certainly not the original windows. Looking at the windows of Merit, which are proposed to be replaced, the ground floor right hand side window, that shows you the detail of it. So it's a 6/6 sliding sash and case window made of painted timber, and you'll notice the kind of rippled glass as well, indicating that it's a good age of window. Ground floor left hand side window, very similar pattern. First floor left hand side window, you can clearly see it's a painted timber sash and case window by its appearance. And this is the upper kind of breaking eaves dormer, first floor right hand side window. The other thing I would say was there's mention of the listed building consent appeal. I've just checked it just now. There's still no determination on that, and we're not due a decision, I'm being told, until the 1st of October this year. But that's a separate matter. That's for Scottish ministers to determine.
Councillor Tate.
Yeah, can we just have a visual on the house next door to the applicant, please? What type of windows are in that? Site visit, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just losing my place. That's the problem. On page 228, I've got the appointed officer comments. And it makes reference to Rose Cottage. I'm looking for the reference to Keeper's Cottage there. It may be in...
Is it a listed building next door, Rob?
I could find that out for you just in a minute. Looking at it, it looks to me like those are 2-pane over 2-pane timber sash and case windows.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be able to confirm. I mean, the difficulty is here, I haven't been out in sight, so I wouldn't be able to confirm that, but that's certainly what they look like, looking at the picture. The window in the porch that you can see there, I'm less sure about. I'll continue to look in the papers, and I'll let you know if I can find something. I might have a bit of time to look for that.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Could you tell me, Robert, how far back these houses are from the public roadway?
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying to get my DJI map system up on the big screen. I'm trying to work out how to do that. I've got it logged in here, but of course you won't be able to see that up on the big screen. I'll try and get answers to both of these questions just now, the listed building one and the distance. Excuse me. Okay, I think I've got the answers now. When you look at this viewpoint, this is taken at the edge of the public road as it's appearing on my map. The building on the left-hand side, Hope Cottage, is Category C listed. Keeper's Cottage on the right-hand side is Category C listed as well. As you move around here, the one on the left-hand side, Rose Cottage, is Category C listed, and the church in the background there, you can see the tower, is Category A listed. This is all located within Durisdeer Conservation Area. So when you're looking at the point where the picture is taken and moving around, I'm assuming this is pretty much a direct pan round, that distance I'm coming up with about 14.7 metres. So in the region of 45 to 50 feet distance from where the picture's taken. The windows question about what type of windows they are in Keeper's Cottage, I don't have the answer to yet, but I'll keep looking for that one. Okay.
The point, Chair, I was trying to make, is that a public area of grassland or is it privately owned? Because if it's public, people can walk up right to the door and windows.
It certainly reads to me as a public area, or at the very least a communal area. It's like I say, it's almost like a village green type feature. It doesn't appear to be viewed to any particular property. You know, there's nothing on it. There's a lamp post on it as well. There's stones to prevent cars on it. There's some old feature that I'm not sure what that stone is, but there's nothing to indicate that anyone's got ownership of that. You know, certainly in the adjacent houses. You know, there's not any garden areas or features like that spilling over at all. So I'm taking that. Certainly, it looked to me like that was kind of public open space. Yeah.
Is there any other questions on the report? Points that we'd like to raise? No. Members ready to go to a decision notice? It was refused on the grounds was H, E2 and H8. Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Tate?
Yeah, I just think we should go with the recommendations.
I don't see anyone else indicating they wish to speak, so is that unanimous?
I think so, aye.
There we go.
Thank you, Chair. Members have agreed to uphold the original decision and refuse the application.
I have no further business. Thank you for landing me in the chair.